probably do not have tonight is Jim. And is Laura Cooper on board?
She is traveling, so she won't be joining us tonight.
Okay, great. Well, she's probably having a lot more fun than we are on Valentine's night. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge our land COCC land acknowledgement. The purpose is to acknowledge someone to say, I see you, you are significant. The purpose of a land acknowledgement is to recognize and pay respect to the original inhabitants of a specific region. It is an opportunity to express gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we exist in. COCC would like to acknowledge that the beautiful land our campuses reside on are on the original homelands of the Wasco Warren Springs people. They ceded this land to the U.S. government in the Treaty of 1855. The Paiute people were forcibly moved to the Warren Springs Indian Reservation starting in 1879. It is also important to note that the Klamath Trail ran north through this region to the Great Celilo Falls trading grounds. Descendants of these original people are thriving members of our community today, and we acknowledge and thank them, the original stewards of this land. So with that, I'd like to go on to roll call.
Yep. Noting that Laura Kraska Cooper, Jim Porter, and President Chesley are absent for tonight's meeting. Calling the roll, Joe Krenowitz.
Here.
Erica Scatbold.
Here.
Aaron Mers.
Here.
Aaron Foote Morgan.
Here.
Alan Unger.
Here.
Alicia Moore.
Here.
Laura Bomey.
Here.
Michael Lalonde.
Here.
Anne-Marie Hamlin.
Here.
Zach Boone.
Here.
Darren McCray.
Here.
Kyle Matthews.
Here.
Paul Taylor.
Here.
I believe Jeremy Green is joining us later. Is that true, Zach?
That's expected, but he may be a little bit late.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Jen Kovitz, this ends the roll.
Great. Thank you very much. Is there any agenda changes or adjustments? Hearing none, we'll leave it as it is. Any, since we are Zoom only this evening, is there any public comment on the Zoom world?
We didn't receive any in advance and no one requested the Zoom link.
Okay. Okay, hopefully everyone's received and looked at our board packet. We have our consent agenda, and which includes our work session minutes and our regular meeting minutes. Is there any adjustments or changes or anything we need to comment? Hearing none, entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Aaron Mers. Second.
Okay, it's a double Aaron, first and second. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Information items. Let's go on to the monthly budget status. And Michael, anything we need to be aware of?
No, not really.
Okay.
It's pretty straightforward, like we do every month.
Okay. Is there any other items on our information items that we would like any of the board members like to address or inquire about? Okay. So we do have a presentation under the Community College Support Fund changes, which is Michael and Alicia.
All right. You should, hopefully you're not seeing my calendar, instead seeing a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
Good. It's always a good start. All right, so Michael and I are here to talk to you a little bit about some changes that'll be forthcoming with our Community College Support Fund. He's going to give an overview of the very bare bones basics of how it's working, because we really want to focus on some new changes that'll be coming into place. And I'll be leading that section as I was part of a statewide work group on that work. So feel free to jump in with any questions along the way. I will give you the caveat that basics that Michael's sharing could be a 45-minute presentation by the head of the state agency that oversees this, but just wanted to give you the short overview and high-level components of that. So Michael, take it away.
Okay, so we're just going to go over our major funding sources for the college in the general fund. Of course, property taxes are the largest and most stable and usually growing at 42%, tuition at 30%, and then state aid at 20%. So state aid is something that the Oregon legislature decides upon every other year. So right now it's at 20% of our overall funding. You can see those don't add up to 100%. We have other funding from things like interest income, lease income, and transfers from other funds. Now, the way that the state aid is divided up, once the state legislature decides on a number, and roughly it was 800 million for the biennium, then they take about 10 to 15 million dollars off the top. They can call it categorical funding. PEC refers to it as set-asides, and that's specific educational items that are funded before anything else. So it could be corrections education, out of district, distance learning, anything like that. Then they do something called base funding, which is the second tranche that they take out of the funding. And this is just to make sure that all small community college have a good funding source that is stable. That's usually right around 20 million. So for this biennium, it's 20 million. And then the biggest piece, which is enrollment funding, which is based on an average full-time equivalent student. And there's a calculation that they do, which basically averages it over about 3 years. And that represents about $370 million.
And please disregard the text in that green box. I realized that's a cut and paste error, but the enrollment funding really is about how many literally head count of students and credit and eligible non-credit courses as of the 4th week of every quarter. So the vast majority of the state funding model is all about student head count.
All right, Alicia.
Yeah. And so one of the things the state wanted to do is bring together a work group to review the Community College Support Fund, or CCSF, because it had been over 10 years, since the last time they did that review. We also knew that there was some conversations within the legislature talking about shifting our model to a performance-based funding. In other words, how are we serving our students and how are they succeeding other than simply counting the number of students who enrolled? I was asked to be part of that state group to bring not only a student perspective, but this is also my dissertation topic, so could bring quite a bit of research perspective to the table as well. I promise not to geek out on you too much on that front. The goals of this work group were to not only align with the state goals for what we called priority populations, and you'll hear about that in just a minute, but also to align with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission's they term it their equity lens, but it's really their commitment to how do we expand access to underrepresented populations and underserved populations through some of our state programs. Wanted to support our community college mission and recognize that we are a comprehensive community college system in Oregon, and we want to build on institutions' existing strengths. So 26 people came together. That's the big work group over the period of just over about a year. Some of us hung on for some additional cleanup work at the end, but ultimately what this work group did is propose to HEC a change to our funding model. And they gave us some parameters at the beginning. And what you see in this kind of bar graph is, here's the funding that Michael just talked about, the categorical funding, the base funding, and the amount of enrollment funding. We had suggested, as they looked at this performance-based funding, that they not allocate more than 10% of the entire funding model, at least to start, towards any type of performance funding. And ultimately came up with is they call it a student support and student success model. Some refer to it as an input or an output model. But what HEC will be funding community colleges on, and I'll share the timeline in just a minute, is how many students are we serving in these 4 priority populations? How many career and technical education, adult learners defined as 25 and older, how many students of color, and how many low-income students. And the only way to measure low income levels right now is through the federal financial aid application and those that are receiving a Pell Grant. On the output or the student success side, looking at how many students complete 15 or more credits in a certain time frame. That time frame is still being discussed. 30 or more credits in a certain time frame. And the reason those 2 markers are important markers is we know that through a significant number of national research programs, that if students who complete 15 credits are more likely to go on and complete 30 credits, and those who complete 30 credits are more likely to go on and complete a credential. So there's a ton of research to support those credit completion markers. Also looking at this, at how many students complete college level writing or math. And this is a new one for the state. Is initially this was thrown out here to say how many complete a certificate or degree. And several of us spoke up and said, as we're being more and more responsive to our workforce needs, not all students need a credit-based certificate or degree. And so we're able to shift our thinking and broaden thinking to say any credential of any kind. So a non-credit completion or a credit completion or credential is how institutions will receive a certain portion of their funding. Some notes on this: the 3-year weighted average still applies. That's that average Michael talked about. This is purely headcount driven, right? So the number of CTE, number of adults, number of students of color, number of Pell eligible, and same with the number of students in the student success column is all purely about headcount, not converting that to FTE, which is another part of the state funding formula. And then the student success metrics, the output metrics are weighted for those with priority populations. Any questions on that piece before we move to the when and how much and all that good stuff? Okay. So the way this will work is still looking at that same pie chart that we looked at earlier. You see the current model on the left-hand side, the new model on the right-hand side, and you can see that 10% of the funding will be dedicated toward the success and support fund direction or performance funding. And the way that'll play itself out is one of the things we did ask is to give a window of time for institutions to make the change. Initially, HEC wanted to put this change into place for this current academic year. And we had to say, first, we've got to figure out how we're going to count all those things, because not only do some of our institutional systems not track on that, the state's system doesn't track on many of those markers. So we need some time to figure out how we get the data back to HEC. But we also need time for institutions to rethink perhaps how they're serving these populations and how they might do outreach to these populations. And so this doesn't kick in until the next academic year at the end for fiscal year 25. And we also ask that that be graduated in over time. So you can see that for the baseline student support and success model, the amount of dollars that are allocated there. And then you can also see how, when they're weighted for priority populations, the additional funding. Some important notes here. One of the things when an early model of this was ran, far enough in, we had enough baseline data to do some work, but not maybe to the finite or detailed level we have now, is COCC stood to benefit very well. In fact, we were one of the ones who were in the top 1 or 2 community colleges in the state who would be gaining additional funds because of this. And bottom line, that means we're already serving these populations and or already doing well in terms of their success. The other piece of this to remember is state aid for COCC is only 20% of our revenues, whereas some Oregon community colleges, state aid is 50% and more of their revenue. So changes like this will have a much more significant impact for some, but not as much on COCC. So that is the really quick rundown on that. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the changes in the formula, timing, anything along those lines, if that's helpful for you.
When does this take effect, Alicia?
So it starts at the end of this next academic year. Oh, wait, actually, excuse me, I said that wrong. The data from the 24-25 academic year will be the first year that in which we should start seeing those funds. We won't see the funds until the next fiscal year, but that's just how the formula works. Alan, go for it.
I'm a little confused with, okay, we have property tax and we got state aid and tuition, but property taxes ours, we're going to get it. In this formula that we have, does it end up, I'm a little confused on, do we get our 42% in property tax, all of it? And then we get a little up or down on state aid? And would we then get less state aid than others, that schools that it's 50% of their CCSF?
Yeah.
Or how's that work?
So what this really does is shrink the amount of money set aside for purely enrollment, purely headcount, from 93% of the entire community college support fund. And it takes 10% of that away to put into this new performance funding model. So that's how it fits for the entire state. When it comes to the college's funding formula, we know that because our property tax collection rate is at a far higher rate than other districts in Oregon, the state looks at that whole piece and looks at our total public resources. So if we receive more in property tax, that means we receive less in state aid. Whereas other counterparts, it's the other way. They receive less in property tax, so they receive more in state income. Does that help with that?
Yeah, I guess that's how I always thought it was, but okay.
Yeah, and so the only portion of the entire funding model that's changing with this is taking 10% from that enrollment side of things and shifting it to performance.
Do you like this model? I mean, is this better than they did it before?
I do. I think it puts in some accountability factors for community colleges. It helps set priorities for the state. We actually built in a requirement that I think it's every 5 years. We'll do an initial review after 3 years, but after that, every 5 years, a group is required to come back together too. So if priorities happen to change in the state, then we're not just sitting out here dormant for the next 10 plus years before anything changes. So I do think it is a good model. We know nationally, 10% of state aid is not a lot to dramatically shift institutional culture, initial supports, programming, that kind of thing. But there's no two like models out there to say this is the best one to hold it up to. So I think this is a very well thought out one. It's graduated in. It had the collective input of community college across the state. Nobody really won, nobody lost, but we all, from a consensus standpoint, agreed that this was a good direction to go. So having that buy-in, I think, is an incredibly important piece of this model that not all states have enjoyed.
As we go through all this work, does it help the legislature realize that they need to support us at a higher level?
That's a crystal ball I wish I had, Alan. I
Well,
think what it shows is that we're willing to respond to their concerns, and that when they say, we really like you to think this direction, we're smart enough to know when they would put that direction in place versus versus us having to get in front of that. And we got in front of that and I think worked as a partner with the legislature on this.
Thank you.
Erin Mers, Erin Foote, Morgan, go ahead.
Go ahead, Erin, if you had something.
Oh, just more curiosity. Is this change applying to 4 years as well?
No, this is just the Community College Support Fund.
Okay.
The 4 year have a separate funding model, and they already
Right.
have some
Okay.
performance elements put in place.
Thank you.
Alicia, what are some of the things that the state is wanting schools to do to create these changes? And you spoke about that a little bit, but can you just elaborate on that a little?
The beauty of this model, Erin, is that they're not telling institutions what they have to do, just saying, here's where the state is prioritized in terms of populations and success markers. And we were very clear that we didn't want the state telling us how to achieve that because we are all so wildly different in our operations and setups. So, and I would point to, and you'll hear a little bit more from Anne Marie and me in just a minute, but some of our guided pathways work aligns completely with this direction, right? Guided pathways is about serving underserved students and credit completion and credit momentum. And that's one fantastic model to help us move in this direction.
Are you excited just at a colleague level to kind of see what other schools do? And is it sort of an interesting discussion amongst folks with your colleagues?
That's a great question. It has not been a loud discussion, at least in my circles. I don't know if Anne Marie, if the Vice President of Academic Affairs or Michael's group have been talking a lot about it. Most were pretty surprised when I've shared stuff like this. So yeah, I don't know where people are with this discussion quite yet.
Interesting.
All right.
Joe, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments or questions, regards to the presentation? It's a complicated formula, how we do our business here at COCC, let alone, dealing with our cohorts and over in Salem. If it's possible, I'd like to have a copy of that, if we could, download it from the website or send it to us directly.
Of this presentation, Joe, or the whole statewide one?
No, just your presentation.
Okay. Absolutely.
And then I'm curious when we'll get an update on what we estimate or predict that it'll look like.
I think that's a good question that we'll have to ask the state.
Okay.
What the state runs it through is so complex. I don't know that we have all of their back-end programming determined for ourselves. But I think that's a great question we can farm out to the institutional research data folks who will do all the reporting with the state.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because if people are surprised by this, right, and it's like a new concept and all of us are kind of like scratching our heads over it, I'm just curious when you know more. It would be great if you came back and shared it with us.
Sure, absolutely.
Does this have to be approved by the legislature, or does HEC get to move forward with it on its own?
HEC has already approved it, so they get to move forward. It is not a legislative mandate. It was a legislative suggestion. How's that?
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no other conversations or questions, let's go ahead and go on to the next item. The guided pathways update.
Yes, good evening. I'm very glad to be able to present this to you. I've asked Alicia to chime in at some important moments and any other moments she wants to chime into. But I'm going to start us off here by sharing my screen. Hopefully you're seeing a guided pathways slide. Excellent, thank you. So we've been talking about guided pathways for some years at COCC, and my goal tonight is to give you kind of the snapshot of here is where we are now. So I'm going to start by reminding you of, well, if I can get my screen to move forward. I guess I'm going to have to do it that way. There we go. Remind you of one of our goals in the strategic plan, and that is to be a student-ready college. You might wonder to yourself, how in our guided pathways work are we going to strive toward that, and how will we measure our success in that way? And so we had a number of things we wanted to share here. The first one being credit momentum, which Alicia just mentioned a few minutes ago, is a really important measure of how well our students are doing. And it's an important component of guided pathways work. And by credit momentum, what we mean is how many credits students are taking in their first term and their first year, because we know if they took, and Alicia will have these numbers in the top of her head, a certain number of credits, they are much more likely to continue on and complete the pathways that they have established themselves in. Second, completing the college level math and writing course requirements is a very important marker of success for these students as well. And that is, again, something that we're looking at broadly in guided pathways. We're interested in how well we are retaining our students from the first term to the second, and from the first year to the second. We have tracked on those numbers for some time now, but it is also very important in our guided pathways work. And we're definitely going to be tracking on how many students have completed their stated goals. All of this, thanks to the good work from our institutional effectiveness office, also can be disaggregated by a whole variety of demographic factors, and that will be an active part of our ongoing assessment. The original guided pathways philosophy of creating paths and helping students stay on those paths to successful completion and verified learning, we always want to make sure that they're learning what we say they're learning, still forms an important foundation for our work, but there's been an advance in guided pathways to what we call Guided Pathways 2.0. And in this, if you're looking at this slide, I want you to look at the statements at the bottom: ask, connect, inspire, and plan. These are really the important components of Guided Pathways 2.0 that we have gotten especially excited about at COCC, because it kind of fits with our philosophy of how we want to interact and motivate students. So that includes asking students, we need to ask them early and often, what are your interests? What are your goals? How can we help you get there? We want to connect students with resources in their areas, faculty are in their areas, peers, mentors, and even potential employers through a whole variety of programs. We hope to inspire students. We will inspire students early in their time at COCC. So and I'll describe in a moment what we're doing to work toward that. But again, getting students really engaged and energized and excited about something that they're learning about is critical to the success of this work. And then finally, knowing that we have a plan and we help students develop a plan to reach the goals that they've set for themselves. Those are the four. I'll probably refer to the ASIP model in a future slide, but those are the four components of Guided Pathways 2.0. So in last year's work, I said this has been ongoing for a while. I'm just going to refer briefly to last year's work. We had several work groups that were charged with proposing action items with which we would then build a multi-year implementation plan. We got great reports from those groups. We did build the implementation plan, and that's how we're moving forward now. So this year, we have another set of work groups, and the titles of those work groups are on the slide in front of you. I'll just tell you a little bit about that. And their goal is to take that multi-year plan and put actual actions in place in usable form that will shape our work over the next couple of years. So in the admitted student communications, we're thinking about how and when we communicate with newly admitted students. We want to do that well before they start classes. And we want to communicate about our pathway options, asking about student interests. Here's that ask component, connecting them to resources and related pathways. The new student onboarding group is thinking about how we work with new students once they've decided that they want to be Bobcats. We want to get them set up for success in their pathways and thinking about what they might do step by step along the way. This also plays into the academic advising and career services group. And this is all about how we continue through faculty and professional advisors to ask students about their interests, to connect them with the right people and resources, and to help them plan how they're going to navigate toward that goal that they have set for themselves. The new student orientation is thinking about how we reshape our new student orientation around the various pathways. So we may have pathway specific orientations so that students can be immersed within their field of interest really early on in their experience. And that will, of course, have strong elements of the ask, connect, inspire, and plan aspects of guided pathways. And the trailhead courses is kind of a fun one that we've been working on. These represent how we would design or redesign, in some cases, courses that students would take very early in their time at COCC that do provide that inspiration, get them excited about their subject matter, get them engaged in really important ways that keep them engaged as they move on through their programs. We want to ignite that enthusiasm as early as we can. So a little over 2 years ago, one of our work groups, planning work groups, developed what we are calling our 8 education pathways. And I've put those on the screen for you to see here. They determined which disciplines would also be in those 8 pathways. And as we move to our ultimate launch date for guided pathways, we will do continual reflection on these groupings and the disciplines that are within them, and tinker as we see better and better ways to group those for student success.
And what I would add here on this piece, this is a foundational piece to guided pathways. Instead of giving students this giant, I mean, you can't see my arms in this small computer screen, but giving the students more than 100 choices. And we know students tend to scroll through those top 20 choices before they look at the remaining 80 or more. Instead of saying all those different career and major options, this is trying to cluster like programs or like majors into these pathway groups. We then embed that pathway language all throughout those work groups that Anne Marie just mentioned. So instead of getting a letter of admission, say from our director of admissions, they might get a letter of admission from the lead faculty member under the health sciences pathway. Bobcat orientation would be redesigned so all the STEM students were in one orientation group together. The natural resources students were in an orientation group together. So this is really foundational to all the work that you saw on the previous slide and guides how we'll serve students throughout their time with us.
Perfect. Thank you. And as I mentioned, this is just one part of all the prep work that we've been doing thus far. And I'm going to have Alicia continue on for the next slide to explain a little bit about some of the other prep work that has been happening.
Yeah, you can go ahead and pull that whole thing up here, Anne Marie.
Okay.
So Anne Marie and I brought a group together right before the winter break to say, what could we get, under what timeline could we get everything done? And we were really hoping for a fall of 2025 start. But what that meant is by October of 2024, when we open up that next year's admissions application, we would have to have everything ready to go. And to do this work, there's a lot of behind the scenes work that we have to get into. For example, like how do we ask students about their majors? Where in our system is that? Can we place that information? We're in the middle of implementing a new admissions application. Can that be done by October? There's just so much behind the scenes work to really tee everything up and do this in a clean way that we are taking a lot of this year and into this summer to do some of that systems redesign piece. And the reason this is important is normally we open an admissions application in October of one year for fall the following, so 11 months in advance. In the first 3 months alone, we receive about a third of our new student applications during that time. And if all of a sudden we have our current time communications going out, then we have to pause and redirect all that communications. We felt that that wasn't good service to students. So instead, we really wanted to get these infrastructure pieces in place before we really launch the rest of our work.
Thank you. So we've decided to go with a two-phase approach to this work, which, as you can imagine, has many, many moving parts. Alicia just described a small number of those. So beginning to think about this in spring of 2025, we'll be thinking about our preview days. These are for high school students to help them understand this organization of 8 pathways that we have and what that means for them as they make choices as they're entering their college work. We want them to be thinking about pathways early on. So preview days are a great way to start that conversation. Throughout the summer of 2025, we expect that we will be using our admitted student communications. So they've told us they're going to be Bobcats. They've told us they're going to arrive. How are we interacting with them to continue asking and connecting with them through that summer? Again, using all of the ACIP principles. And then in fall of 2025, we expect to launch our first Bobcat orientations within some of the pathways and trailhead courses within some of the pathways. So we're hoping to launch at least a few of those in the fall of 2025. And the work groups that are working now are going to define more carefully what will be appearing and when. Phase 2 takes place during 2026. Beginning with winter of 2026, when we really want to take a moment to pause and say, okay, how are we doing so far? We've put a number of things in place. What do we need to tinker with? What can we improve? And how will we move on from here? In summer of that year, we expect to have our prospective student materials ready and our website all prepared with guided pathways information so that students entering will see everything available to them in those two broadly speaking areas. And then fall of 2026 is when we expect our full launch. So very excited about this timeline that we've put together, which is challenging, but I think doable. And wanted to mention the number of people involved in this is far greater than I can even tell you. I'm going to give you a slide that shows a few of those names. These are names of folks who are involved in work groups this year. Probably very close number to that have been involved in work groups over the last few years. So I wanted to just point out to you that this is a really small slice of the pie of folks who have been bringing really great ideas and skills to this large project of moving us toward a guided pathways model. With that, that completes my general overview of where we are. Alicia and I would be happy to take additional questions if you have them.
This is really exciting. Congratulations. So I saw communication, or maybe more robust communication, comes during phase 2. How are you going to be communicating for phase 1 to students?
For admitted student communications, it's actually part of phase 1, but it's fully launched in phase 2. And so there's some things we'll be able to get done early, and other things we know that we'll need to potentially redesign based on some back-end technology system support that we have with that. So the ultimate goal, though, is to say by fall of 25, about half the educational pathways will have all of those elements done. We'll learn from that, and by fall of 26, fully launch across all the pathways. So updating, redesigning everything that was on that list that Anne Marie saw, and quite a bit more of other things in the background too.
Thanks.
What does the website redesign look like?
Yeah, Jen, is she on here? Yeah, Jen, if you want to briefly share your thoughts there.
Yeah, absolutely. So excitingly, concurrent to the guided pathways efforts, we've actually been approved to do a holistic website redesign for all of cocc.edu. And as you can imagine, instead of trying to run those projects as 2 separate ones, we're trying to wrap our arms around the guided pathways website work is actually a component of the broader redesign, working on a similar timeline. So for many of those components that you just saw timelined out, they actually require a website to point to, right? And so the website is one of the key reasons why, to Alicia's earlier point, we pushed the timeline out a little bit so we could get that right. So we've got a really awesome group of faculty, administrators, classified staff who are coming together to do this work. The other great news is that there are lots of good examples of guided pathways websites out there. And so we're not reinventing the wheel. And so we're looking at what our colleagues are doing across the state, across the country, and really borrowing their best ideas with a great deal of upcoming stakeholder surveying, testing, to make sure that what we think will help students and communicate most effectively is actually the right work. And so again, that extra year is critical to the web component of that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it's exciting.
Okay. And Jen, you brought up a couple things that I don't know that we shared earlier. Is guided pathways is not just an Oregon thing. It's not just a COCC thing. This is a national model that a lot of a substantial number of community colleges have implemented. So there's great ways for us to learn from our sister institutions across the United States. So that's a fantastic piece. And then just the impact that we know other institutions have had, especially at other states who've been doing this work a lot longer, in terms of student success rates that Anne Marie showed at the beginning is pretty phenomenal. So we're excited for this work to really take hold at COCC.
Given all the factors that you listed, right, there's some pretty big projects that are going on. Are there any things that are you're worried about them not being on time to meet that timeline? Like what are the biggest risks?
You know, the leads for each of those areas are in the middle of finalizing their more definitive timeline, but everybody agreed that fall of 2026 is reasonable to do. So,
yeah, I think I would just add to that you know, we have, as Alicia points out, a lot of good models to follow. So at this point, I'm not seeing big risks ahead of us. Challenges, yes, but there are resources out there to help us get where we want to go. So, yeah.
And some of it is really just taking our current work and wrapping it under this educational pathway model.
Exactly.
Admitted student communications, for example, we just redesigned and recreated all that about 3-ish, 4-ish years ago at the most. We don't need to start from ground zero. So we've got a lot of good foundational work to help us with that.
And
Yeah.
we've known this is coming. And so we've been doing discipline by discipline academic website redesign work for the last 3 years, for example. We built those new templates to actually be really easy to fit into guided pathways. So there's a behind the scenes kind of part of the web that we just need to turn on when we're ready to go. The infrastructure already exists. And so because this work has been so extensive, it's been nice because we've been able to kind of plan for it in the projects as they've been going along rather than having to do something totally different from scratch.
And we're in the fourth cohort, so the other colleges, a lot of them are further along than us, so they're already implementing things now that we're going to do in the next year.
Yeah, Lynn Benton Community College started this work 8-ish years ago, and then the state got a grant for the last 4 years for all of us to come on board, the rest of us to come on board during that process. So our other Oregon Community College peers, some are 1 year, maybe 2 years, 3 years ahead of us, Lynn Benton aside. So yeah, we definitely have some local knowledge that we can tap.
Mhm. And
So
they've done a lot of things and given them a second try, and so we can definitely learn from them on accounts too.
Okay. So I hear people say, yeah, my student went to college and it's an exploration time for students. And they would say, oh yeah, my daughter changed her major 3 times. Does
Yeah.
that end up being a problem, or is that easy to adjust to?
Actually, we believe in exploration, and so we've built that into the plan. Each of the pathways has an exploratory element to it. And students would be able to, say, start in one and through exploration, move to another pathway. So they're not locked into a particular pathway, but we do encourage the exploration through this whole continuous process of asking and connecting, and hopefully inspiring students along the way.
And what we know about guided pathways work is if we're very intentional about asking students often about what their interests are, helping them develop a plan to get there, and then help surrounding them with those wraparound services, that students tend to choose the pathway that they probably hadn't thought of before earlier in the process, and then they tend to stay on that path. And that's really another fundamental piece of, instead of giving them this giant 103, I think is the total number of majors we offer students, you shrink that window in broad interest areas and then allow students to gradually explore those areas within there. So Guided Pathways really is about helping students make that decision earlier and making a right decision earlier in the process.
So students that, because of work or family or money or something, they're taking onesie-twosie classes each year as opposed to a full load. Does that just mean their guided pathway extends out over 5 years instead of 3?
Yep. They would get the same kinds of supports from us in their own timeline.
But the state doesn't really look at them because they're not the 3-year average student.
The 3-year weighted average, the reason the 3-year weighted average is in the state funding model is so that to help boom and bust periods for institution, right? So it says next year we'll get funds for this year and the prior 2 years. So if we had a huge spike last year and we get a huge influx of state revenue, we don't spend it all in 1 year. It's kind of there's an analogy in there, something about a parent, instead of giving their allowance once a month and letting kids blow it at the very beginning, you give it to the same amount, but a little bit over each week, right? So that's what the weighted average is about. Students will count at some point in their career with us. They don't have to fall within a 3-year window.
I just want to say thank you. This is great. This is the kind of thing that's going to help with student success. So kudos to all the work and all those 24 people who have been spending time in it.
We will pass that along. Thank you. I believe that wraps up our presentation.
Is there any other comments or questions in regards to this presentation?
Just even to that question about risk, how thoughtful you've been for so many years to put this in place, and then highlighting all the people involved. Like, thank you to you all and everybody who's been involved to be able to get Guided Pathways, off the ground. So it's really exciting to see it happening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much for the hard work, and you have a lot more hard work going up over the next two years. Looks like you got a great team of folks already working with you, so thank you very much. So with that, let's go on to old business. The Madras expansion update. Would go to the Zach and Jeremy team.
Thanks, Joe. This is really intended to be a short, we're not going to do a comprehensive update on the project today or tonight. We actually did one for the campus community last Friday that Jeremy and I did. We called a lunch and learn. And it's been a long time since we'd given sort of a in-depth update on the project to our faculty and staff. So that's great. And if anyone wants to see that recording, I can of course send it out to board members. But we've done that for you all here a couple times and at the real estate committee. So really the intention tonight, and I think there's an item in your packet, is really sort of twofold. Jeremy's working very hard with our design teams, our architect and our CMGC to get that final, what we would call our guaranteed maximum price, and get all that finalized here in the next couple months so we can bring that information through the real estate committee to the board. And again, the real estate committee is aware of that. Joe and Eric are here, Jim and Laura are not. But we recently, in part of our outreach to as many grantors in the state as we can find, the MJ Murdoch, I should qualify that, in the region, because MJ Murdoch's technically in Vancouver, Washington. So we had a great site visit with one of their program officers, a very in-depth conversation about the project, the program. And one of the things Murdoch likes to see is commitment from organizations that they're going to see a project through. My lens on this is that Murdoch often works with traditional 501c3s, and not that the COCC Foundation isn't, but that this request is coming in combination with the college and the foundation. And so one of the things you can imagine, if you're a small nonprofit and you're asking MJ Murdoch for a big gift, they want to know that that project is going to sustain and be around in 2, 5, 10 years if they're going to invest in it. So a lot of the questions that came up from the funder were related to the financial solvency of the institution, what enrollment might look like, will St. Charles be hiring our students, what's the early plan for budgeting at the campus, et cetera, et cetera. So in that vein, they came up with in that meeting, we had, I think, 36 follow-up items for the trust. Everything as small as the PowerPoint we used the day to show them, to updated board roster for the foundation, to the reserve policy that Michael has been working on diligently. And one of the items was a statement of intent from the institution that we intend to see the project through. They really want to know if they're going to consider $1 million ask that the college is committed to completing the project. So again, the resolution as so written in your packet really speaks to that. It's an item we had told Murdoch we would bring to the board so we could have formal adoption in this public setting, that the college is committed to this project. Again, we shared a little bit of this at the real estate committee. We had intended maybe to have some updated numbers for you tonight. We're just not there yet. So as you know, we'll get those to the real estate committee as soon as we have them. But this is much more of a statement of intent rather than a tie to any numbers. But that's kind of the background and the logic behind this resolution. I'm happy to take any questions, or Jeremy, please feel free to add anything, or even Michael, who was at the site visit as well, that I may have missed. And I think the only thing I would add is the timeline for this, we'll get this follow-up pending resolution passage to Murdoch. Their decision happens in mid-June. So just so you all know what that timeline is, they go back through their board. They have a lot of requests. They're sort of a rolling cycle. So the slot we're in, for lack of a better term, we had this site visit at the end of January, preparation through March, and then our program officer will present to their board. They will make a decision, and that award for our cycle, our slot will be, notification will be on June 27th. Alan.
Sorry, I couldn't get it off mute.
All right.
So when you talk to Murdoch, I support this. I'm just wondering, so we move along and all of a sudden something happens and we have to adjust the project to fit funding or something else. They don't have a problem with that. They just want to make sure we finish.
You got it.
Okay.
Well said.
I attended that meeting with Zach and Jeremy, our president, 3-4 other representatives from our COCC administration. I've been through foundation reviews or questions and answers. They generally last about 30 to 45 minutes. This was a 3-hour meeting, the most intense one that I've ever been on in regards to convincing someone that we are a viable operation and certainly the project is very viable, necessary, as well as a great opportunity for our community college. Their representative is very accommodating to the questions, accommodating to our inquiries, and I'm very proud of everything that he asked of our staff. If we didn't have an answer, we assured them that they would be getting it. Like Zach had mentioned, we have 36. They have 36 items to address, but our staff was very concise, very clear. Even when a board member who's not in the middle of it, I felt very comfortable with the answers, as well as anybody. We can go out and sell this very easily to our communities as well, hopefully as to our future funders as well. But I'm very proud of what occurred, and I feel very comfortable that when June 27th rolls around, this is a one-shot deal with this representative that we met. He'll go to bat for us. He is our conduit to the Murdoch folks. And if I remember right, Zach, this is the first non-501
one of the first, Joe. It turns out they have provided some funding to our friends at Treasure Valley Community College, but yes, this is a little bit new for Murdoch to be in this space for community colleges.
Right. So anyways, it went very well.
Thank you, and I really appreciated you being there, Joe. We had Jeremy, we had Julie Downing, instructional dean there. So this proposal is really about the health, careers, and science and STEM aspects of the project, not the ECE or childcare. This is where their funding priorities are. So Julie Downing was there representing our instructional dean, representing those programs. Lori was there. Sean Tevlin, our amazing grants manager, was there. We wouldn't really be here with any of these conversations without Sean. And then we had Erin McDonald. She's the chair of the foundation board. She was also in attendance to talk about the foundation's commitment to the capital campaign that we have in motion. So it was a good group. And Michael was there as well to talk about the college's finances. And like Joe said, a lot of it is, hey, we basically turned in an application a year ago. That got us to this site visit in January. It's almost like phase 2. Okay, that's great. You cleared the first hurdle. And then the program officer says, okay, here's everything I need now to move you into the next phase. And so that's really kind of the process that Murdoch follows.
Zach, is there any sense that the timeline might change at all?
Hey, Erica, I'm super distracted by, that's so adorable. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Is that Liv?
Say hi to Zach.
The timeline, I can let Jeremy speak to that a little bit, not for this funder. I mean, I think the funder knows, Aaron, at least in Murdoch's case, let's say there was a supply chain interruption in steel. And we've talked about this with other funders, then we would just immediately go back to them and let them know that it doesn't change the request. It would just change the timeline for the actual receipt of funds if we're granted. But Jeremy, you can speak a little bit more to the timeline we're on for construction, if that's your question, Aaron.
It is. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, Aaron, that's the $1 million question, or several $1 million question, right? We have done everything from day one alongside OPSIS, our contracted architect, and our CMGC Kirby. And if you recall, one of the reasons we went out for a CMGC for this project was so that we could front load the project as much as possible to avoid delays once we started to break ground, so that the college would be able to, as best as possible, be student ready according to the timeline that we hope to be, which is fall of 2025. Everything to date says that we're continuing to be on timeline or on schedule for a September open of 2025. There are always things clearly that come up, but we've done as much as possible alongside, like I said, OPSIS and Kirby to ensure that the process has been front loaded to help eliminate any possible delays, which inevitably could still happen. But at this point in time, we're on track.
And the program officer, his name is Moses Lee, PhD, and he's fantastic and has experience in community colleges and higher ed. And he's quite a person in terms of the depth and breadth of knowledge that he has about programs like ours, which was great. We were lucky to get him. Aaron, is that he asked Lori directly this question, pretty much, and she affirmed the college's commitment to it. Murdoch, again, their process, I would just call it very thorough, very formal. So he said that's great, and in the follow-up, wanted to see some sort of board commitment and statement. The foundation board, just so you all know, Erin McDonald from the foundation board, she also was asked that question. She gave the same answer in the moment, but we have written a letter from her supporting the effort and letting him and the trustees there know that the foundation board is 100% behind the project. That doesn't carry quite the same weight. We can say we'll fundraise all day, but this body's endorsement to say, yep, we're behind the Madras project, we're going to see this through. And I think Lori in her answer even talked about, we're going to see it through. Even if there was a delay, this is happening. That would be a delay outside of our knowledge, but in those things happen. But full commitment to the project and seeing Madras expansion completed.
I feel really supportive of this letter, or this statement of intent today as well. Just curious, I'm still understanding all of the fundraising components of this project.
Yeah.
Do we have, I know we don't have hard numbers today, but percentage roughly left to raise?
Yeah, that's a great question, because candidly, the project cost increases every month that goes by, just as the world of inflation does a little bit. We have a little thermometer outside my office and committed, and we have some things under contract, right? So the Miller Lumber property in Madras that was donated is for sale. We expect that to sell. So there's some things in there that we have as placeholders. So we have kind of three terms. We have in the bank, $500,000 from JTMF is already in the bank. Another $500,000 is coming. We have committed, which is where that would be the Miller Lumber property, where we've agreed to, have the proceeds go to the project. We have a large bequest coming to the foundation. Again, that's committed. So when we look at all those things and some donor commitments early on, I think we're probably about 50%, 45 to 55% raised of the project.
Thank you.
And we'll have more of those numbers in detail, Aaron, if not at the March meeting, but for sure at the April meeting. So. And the real estate committee is a prize of all this too. And if Laura or Jim were here, they could speak to that. But if you guys have questions about that, I would never want to get away with the governance model. You can please feel free to reach out to Joe or Erica or other members of the committee.
Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Always.
Be it resolved that the Central Oregon Community College Board of Directors hereby formally declares its intent to ensure completion of a new facility in Madras, Oregon, adjacent to its existing building, using additional institutional resources as necessary.
I'll second.
The motion's been made and seconded. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, great. One last note, I would say this, even if Laura Cooper was on Zoom today or in person, we are so fortunate to have her on board as a board member of the COCC, but on our real estate projects of all the years I've been on boards, she is such a great asset to have for us to utilize, and we don't get a monthly bill from her, but I tell you what, we're very, very lucky.
Thanks, Joe. I agree. And I appreciate everybody's support. You may have seen in the news this week, we received a $300,000 grant from the Roundhouse Foundation too. So that's really great news in this vein. So if any of you know the executive director there, that's a sisters-based organization. They have a lot of ties in Central Oregon, the Borla and Degendorfer family. You can extend your thanks to the trustees there and the staff there at Roundhouse. We're pretty excited about that latest wind in our sails. So thanks, Joe.
Okay, on to new business, the reserve policy. Michael, do you have anything, comments in presentation?
Okay, sorry. had to unmute myself. So I don't have a PowerPoint presentation today, but you have two things in your packet to consider for next month. This is the first reading of the general fund reserve policy. And then I also added a resolution that could be read at your next meeting. So based on the conversation that we had, I think it was a month ago, there was a couple of changes I made to the policy. Under funding of the unrestricted fund balance, I just made it clear that it would be funded from general fund revenues over expenditures for clarity. Then under the decision-making authority, there were some comments about if money is above the 45%, so again, the range is 29 to 45%. If we do go above the 45%, then that additional funding would be transferred to the capital projects fund for the specific areas. And I try to make it as general as possible. I put acquisition of real property, I added to it, matching funds for construction projects, like if we did get a HEC grant, IT infrastructure. And then at the very end of that sentence, I put among others. So the board has discretion on how you spend the money from the capital projects fund. But one thing it does say is it is important to note that the general fund's unrestricted fund balance shall not be allocated to support regular or annual operating expenditures. And why that sentence is in there is we would hate to continually draw down that fund and not use it for some big needs that we have, including Madras, Redmond, deferred maintenance, and maybe some others. And then the final thing I changed at the last paragraph was that I wanted to make it clear that regular reports will be provided to the board and the budget committee. So those are the only things that I heard comments on, and a couple others I thought would be good changes to the policy. So that's really all I had. Joe.
I got a quick question. So is the reserve policy, the reserve fund, separate from the beginning balance? I'm just wondering, we don't, like you just said, we don't want to keep pulling money out of it to do something. So we have beginning fund balances that help with our budgeting. Is that considered separate?
No, the beginning fund balance is there's either revenue added to it or expenses that decrease it. And then whatever happens between those two items, then you have your ending fund balance. So it's part of the equation, if that makes sense. So when we go through the budgeting process, you'll have to look at what our expected revenue is, what our expected expenses are, what do we really think we're going to spend in our expenses? And then if the ending fund balance does go down significantly, that would be a concern. Because you're spending down your available resources. And if you keep doing that for a while, it's going to be bad. Did that answer the question?
I guess it did. I trust you.
Okay.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Michael? So this is the first reading. There's no action to be taken tonight. And our next time we look at that this would be next month's meeting. Is that correct, Michael?
That's correct.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions? So if not, let's go on to the next item. Banner hosting and administration, Laura Boney.
I'm actually going to turn the time over to Darren McCray, our director over that area, and he will cover this.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Laura. Good evening, everyone. The banner hosting and administration resolution has been provided in the board packet for your review. This RFP was developed to move our banner hosted environment from Ellucian's cloud to another cloud partner. Tarseo was the successful bidder, and this resolution is being presented to make you aware of the change and seek your approval to move forward. Are there any questions about the proposed resolution?
Have we stumped you all?
Look to see if my mic was on.
Oh, I'm not too sure. What does, I know Banner, a little bit about Banner, but in reality, what is this tool used for? And who's the benefactors to it?
Sure. I saw Alicia coming off mute. I think almost everybody could. So the Banner is our student information system. We're in the commercial world, our enterprise resource planning software. So it runs all aspects of the college. It allows our students to register for classes. It allows for accounting. It does HR. I saw Alan waving. I wasn't sure if that was to me or not, but Banner.
I'm sorry, my grandchild was on a Facebook and I had to wave to him.
Yeah. So anyway, it runs the entire college essentially. It's the backbone of the college's software. We've had it in place since 1999. It's grown with the college, and about 6 years ago, we made the choice to move it out to the cloud. We hosted it with Ellucian themselves, who are the maker of the software, and we're now looking at moving it to Oracle, which is the maker of the database that software sits on top of.
And I mean, the practical use of it is it's admissions, registration, financial aid, tuition payment, class schedule, course catalog, a lot of our HR stuff, all of our fiscal processes. I mean, it's the backbone of the college. It's called the student information system, but it really does serve all of fiscal services, all the student interactions we have when it comes to anything with their classes. A lot of our community or non-credit work is all housed within that system, and Ellucian is the parent company for it.
Thanks, Alicia.
Does this change any interface for any staff or faculty?
There won't be any front end changes to the software or the interface that our staff and faculty use. We're hoping that it's going to do is improve performance and then allow us to start planning for some future changes. We've been talking about things like what they call a data warehouse, which would allow us to do reporting. Oracle is one of the front runners for data warehouses, and this would allow us to start making changes like that and start looking towards the future. Good question. This is all boring stuff, so I understand if you guys don't have a lot of questions.
Well, on behalf of myself, I knew of it. I could understand what it was used, but basically this is a QuickBooks on steroids plus steroids.
Yeah, if I'd come out like that, you probably would have looked at me a little sideways, but yes, that's a very apropos analogy. Yes. QuickBooks on steroids, exactly.
And given the cost, that's why it's coming to the board.
Yeah.
Great. Would someone not?
Your approval. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's fine, no problem. So we do need to make this is an action item. I would entertain someone to read the resolution and make a motion.
I'm happy to. Be it resolved that the Central Oregon Community College Board of Directors hereby approve entering into a multi-year contract with, say it again.
Yeah, I thought it was Tharseo, but it's Tharseo apparently. Tharseo IT.
Thank you, Tharseo IT, for Banner hosting and administration.
Second.
Okay, we got the Team Aaron person, second motion. So everyone in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, thank you very much and appreciate the presentation, Darren. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Okay, we're on to board member activities. If I can, I'll start with Alan and followed up by Erica.
Start with me, you said?
Yes.
Okay. And I have to apologize to Darren. I read the paper packet and this was added on. And so I have to go back and look online and read it. Okay. So I've been a busy beaver this month. So on the 11th of January, they had a special OCCA board meeting to approve an executive director search process. And then on the 22nd, there was another. And then on the 23rd, there was an OCCA audit. I'm on their budget committee. So we had an audit presentation. And then on the 23rd, I zoomed in on the Jody Patterson presentation. I thought that was great. On the 2nd of February, I had another OCCA regular board meeting. And then on the 12th, I had the OCCA legislative update as we followed the legislature through its short session. And then on the 13th, yesterday, I had an OCCA DEI Zoom where we learned about a legislative bill tool to understand how bills affect diversity, equity, and inclusion. And Christy was there too. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Erica, and then right behind her, Aaron Foot Morgan.
All right. So I missed the January meeting. So on the 5th of January, we had a student success committee meeting. And then on the 24th of January, I attended the COCC State of the College address, and it was so good. I had people who I work with who attended, and they were buzzing afterwards about what COCC does, and like it got their creative juices flowing of like how we at St. Charles could improve upon our career pathways, which, you know, actively we're working on. So kudos to Dr. Chesley for giving it, and for those who wrote that speech and put that together, because it highlighted things in a way that just told an amazing story. And then of course to everybody who contributes to everything all the time at COCC. So it was like a moment to be so proud, I feel. And then that evening I attended a OSU legislative advocacy kickoff. And I think there's a lot of stuff that's going on at OSU that's very much, you know, it's a research university here in Central Oregon. And I think they're working on how to get that message out and to advocate. So I feel like I could say more about it, but I'll just hold off there and then bring you some materials at some point. So thank you.
So Erica, who is your hairstylist?
Liv. It's actually kind of nice. So
Nice.
if I had asked her to do this, she wouldn't do it, but you know, so.
Oh, great. Okay, we're on to Aaron Foot, and then right after that, Aaron Mertz.
Okay. On January 9, I attended the South County Adult Education Committee, which is a group of folks from CYC and Lapine Park and Rec. Vicki Russell, former COCC board member, involved in that. And that's a room where folks talk about their kind of hopes and for the future of all sorts of adult education in Lapine. And I was, they were all very excited about a possibility that the Lapine Park and Rec District has proposed, which is COCC renting a space in their building that's in their parking lot called the J.C. Johnson Building. I don't know if you've spent much time down there. It's a newly renovated building. They caught me by surprise, but we did go out and take a look at that facility and sent a video of that to Lori the next day after I attended the Lapine High School Site Council meeting on January 10. And again, the room was sort of buzzing with excitement about the possibility of COCC having a greater presence. Lots of questions about it. So on my way home from that meeting, gave Lori a call, and I believe that she is following up with Anne Marie on taking a look into it. And that Lapine High School Site Council meeting was a wonderful meeting in general, where COCC got a lot of credit for the work that Anne Marie has done to build deeper relationships with the high school there. Scott Olszewski, just really complimentary of the classes that will begin, some of those new classes that will begin next fall. And there was some great news out of that meeting. Bruce Abernathy had helped the South County Collaborative, which is a new group, a community partner organization focused on increasing graduation rates for La Pine High School students, which have been quite low in recent years. Bruce assisted this organization to secure a $300,000 grant from the Oregon Department of Education, which will support youth in the La Pine, Sun River area to stay in school through mentoring, outreach, and emergency funding. So it's a really inspiring meeting there, and lots of folks excited about all the possibilities on the table. So the last thing I just want to say on La Pine is, Joe, I remember a couple meetings back you mentioning how important it is for community organizations to take the lead if we're going to see an expansion of engagement. It's really important that we have a collaboration there, and the degree of momentum that is occurring in La Pine with the South County Collaborative, the Newberry Regional Partnership, the South County Adult Education Committee, there's just an awful lot of energy down there right now. So excited to keep reporting to you about it. I also attended the Season of Nonviolence opening event with Jody Patterson on January 23rd. This excellent State of the Union address on the 24th, and the College Affairs Committee last Friday, where we discussed a proposal from Anne Marie to draft a policy for that committee to draft a policy on student, faculty, and staff engagement with artificial intelligence. And a really interesting conversation. Lastly, I'm excited about attending this Friday's event, Blend, as part of Black History Month here on campus, with interviews of 10 Black Central Oregonians and their experience, and excited also for next week's second Season of Nonviolence event at Willie Hall called Black Joy. So much going on. Thank you for indulging my long update.
No, thank you very much. Long or short, the volunteer efforts of all our board members is certainly appreciated by our staff at COCC and to the success of our students in Central Oregon. So thank you. So on to Erin Mertz.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Erin. We're so lucky to have your advocacy in South County. You're doing some really incredible work and making some really valuable connections for the college. So thank you. On January 16th, I had a call with Lori. I had some questions about campus safety and kind of history on campus. That was really helpful to get a chance to chat with her. I attended the Jody Patterson event as well on January 23rd, and I just want to recognize Christy and Charlotte for all of their hard work with the Chandler Lecture Series and the Season of Nonviolence. It's a really important event. I also look forward to attending next week, and I also want to recognize Christy kind of on a personal level. She serves on the board committee for my place of employment, which is Cascades Academy. And we had a meeting recently, and her participation in that committee is so incredibly valuable. And her impact goes well beyond the college and into our community. And so I just want to thank her for her service outside of the college, lending her expertise, because I know my school gets a lot of value from that. On the 24th, I attended the State of the College address as well. Kudos, echoing everything Erica said. What a prideful moment that was to be in the room and share that experience in community. It was really wonderful. So congratulations to everybody. And then finally, I attended the EDCO lunch last week. Erin was also there. We joined the COCC table. That was a great opportunity to attend that and learn more about EDCO.
Great, thank you. I met January 19th with Laura Cooper and the president, our Friday meetings. January 25th, I had mentioned that I spent a fair amount of time with the Murdoch Foundation representing the board of directors, and particularly my community in regards to the COCC campus expansion here in Madras. And then on January 30th, the real estate meeting, which you've gotten a report tonight, and we'll have a couple more reports over the next 2 months as well. With that, before we go on to the next item, we did like to just recognize a past board member, Tony Dorsch. He was a COCC Board of Directors member representing Redmond, or basically Zone 3, which is basically from Cook County western boundary over to Sisters, basically from southern Jefferson County to the northern portion of Bend. He was on the board of directors for a period of time, very engaged in regards to our conversations. And I do have something that, and I apologize, Alan, I know that you were elected to his position when he decided to step aside and retire. I did not get hold of you. I know you may have some comments or anything we could possibly add to this recognition of Tony, but I did engage with I'm sorry.
Diane? That's his wife.
No, I'm sorry.
Our team, Jen.
Jen, I'm sorry, I appreciate
Got
it.
it.
Jen, I apologize. It's been a long day and I just had a brain pass there. Jen had put together a nice presentation here, so let me read it to you, to our board, as well as the folks who are on Zoom or future people who will see this evening. This is a recognition of Anthony James Dorsch. He's known to all of us as Tony. He was known to his friends and colleagues here at COCC as well. He passed away in November, and tonight we remember and honor him for his 2 decades of service as the Zone 3 Director of COCC Board. Among his many accomplishments, Tony earned a Master of Science degree from Oregon State University, taught at Linfield College, as well as a COCC Board Director from 97 to 2017. Tony was an unwavering champion of COCC, using his science background to ask probing questions and to keep us on track. He also helped steward the college's expansion into Redmond. In 2022, the COCC board approved a resolution dedicating room 305 on the Redmond campus as the Anthony Tony Dorsch classroom. Tony also enjoyed playing the baritone and clarinet in the COCC concert band and served on the Redmond City Council for 2 terms. He taught biology and chemistry at Redmond High School, which was his alma mater. He and his wife, Diane, also a Redmond High School teacher, together led additional trips to Europe and organized student exchange programs. Please join me in a moment of silence to honor the memory and service of our fellow director, friend, and colleague, Tony Dorsch. Thank you very much. Tony was quite a personality, and he did bring a lot to COCC board directors over that period of 20 years. So once again, thank you for your recognition of him. So with that, and
Joe,
Ellen,
I just
your
wanted to
comments.
I just wanted to add one more thing. Yes, Tony was a great person. He was a Redmond institution for a long time. And he also told me that one of the things that he did for the board at COCC is he reminded everybody about the history. He was, what he said was, I bring and remind people of the history of COCC. So he was always proud of knowing the past and bringing it to the present.
Thank you, Alan. Okay. With that, we'll go on to the president's report. Alicia?
Yeah, thank you. And I will say just on, I went to college with one of Tony's children, and we all went to his same alma mater, and in reconnecting with some of his kids a couple of years ago, I know the family is greatly appreciative of all the outreach that you've done in the last couple of months. So thank you to those of you who were able to do that. Want to just share a couple quick updates. Season of Nonviolence is one of those. We've got some great Great feedback from Aaron Footmorgan and Aaron Murs. So you learned lots of great things about what's coming up next week, and they're also in your board packet. So I'd love to have as many of you engage as you are able. Wanted to share an enrollment update. This is the 6th week of the term. As you heard earlier, about the 4th week of the term is when we lock down numbers and send those for an initial run to the state. And just thrilled to share that once again, a 2nd quarter in a row, is we've got good news all around. We're up 10.5% with our FTE and just about 3% with our head count. So students are taking slightly more credits than what they have been compared to this time last year. All of our campus locations are up in enrollment. Online, remote, hybrid, that's all kind of still settling out. So, but those numbers are still super strong. And a lot of our new student populations, especially returning after an absence and transfer students, are up this quarter, just like they were during fall term. So very excited about that news. And that increase is pretty substantial compared to our peers. What we're seeing from a lot of our peers around, everybody's up from about 1 to 3, 4-ish%. But to be up this much is a fantastic sign. And we assume that will carry forward into spring. Related to enrollment, part of a lot of our students' enrollment process is completing the federal financial aid form. And as some of you have been reading headlines lately, that's not going so well. It's going okay for students at the federal level. It's not going great. The U.S. Department of Education initiated a process in the last several years to simplify the FAFSA application process. And that was supposed to roll out this last October. They delayed that rollout to be in January. And when they opened that doors, lots of people came running through that, so much so that they didn't have the back-end system set up to manage that volume, nor the staffing to help process that. Typically, we receive student data around end of February, early March each year to get then load that in our systems, do our processes, and get that out to students by the end of March or early April. At this point in time, the Department of Ed has not given institutions a date by which they will be releasing that data. This is a national problem. Every college or university is facing this issue, and it is all squarely on the shoulders of the Department of Education. To help with that, us, like many colleges, are regularly communicating with students about what the process will look like once we get that data, how quickly we can turn it around, and that sort of thing. And the Department of Ed has also thrown us a couple little bones this week in saying that the amount of work that they expect us to manually verify on student applications is going to be reduced significantly this year in order to aid in our processing times. So just wanted to share that information with you because I know I've gotten other questions from lots of folks in the community. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me, or if you're talking to members of the community or potential students, have them contact our financial aid office because they can give them the most up-to-date information there. And then, season of nonviolence was one of the pieces we wanted to share, but then I'm going to ask Jen to talk a little bit about CTE days and some of the Oregon Community Colleges work in that regard and how COCC, again, knocked it out of the ballpark. Thanks, Jen's good work.
This was going to be a lot. Thanks, Alicia. This is going to be a lot more fun in person. So I'm just going to have to bring this with me to the March board meeting, and you'll get to see it all there. But so Career and Technical Education Month is something celebrated both in the K through 12 system as well as in community colleges across the state and the nation. And so happy CTE month, that's February. And each year, under the direction and guidance of the Oregon Community College Association, COCC has joined other community colleges and our K through 12 and workforce partners to celebrate. And typically that's looked like advocacy at the legislature or social media posts or email newsletters. And especially with a short legislative session and difficulty getting traction and engagement for social media posts, we wanted to do something different this year. And so we came up with the idea of what if we sent a CTE, a Career and Technical Education gift box, to each one of our elected leaders at the county, state, and federal level. Why not show in action just the breadth, depth, and radical coolness of what happens in CTE. So again, this was going to be much cooler when we could pass these around, but so if you're a county commissioner, if you are a state representative or senator, or if you are a federal senator or congressperson, you received a box from COCC last week. And in that box, you got a pocket-size Miranda rights to fit inside your wallet, as well as an evidence bag from the criminal justice discipline. You received a beautiful wood magnet carved from our manufacturing students in Redmond. Again, really challenging to do this well, but it even says on the back, proudly made by MATC Redmond. If you come to Meal of the Year, you might see more of those. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Just like pulled it right out of my unmuted and everything. Great mind.
Our forestry team, it still smells so good. Cut sections of Western juniper and planed them, and then wrote the scientific name, and then also gave a little COCC forestry stamp, and it made the whole box smell amazing, like juniper. Because our early childhood education folks are just so on brand, they made this really cute collection of pencil crayons with a sharpener in the lid, and their logo. So 12 pencil crayons, just hoping to spark creativity from our early childhood education. You know, you never know when you're going to need lip chap and a case for it. So our fire and ENS folks tossed that in. You know, you got to take care of your lip health while you're helping others.
Also known as chapstick south of the border.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm Canadian. Lip chap, what do
I'm
you
like,
call it?
no, that's what I
Chapstick?
use for the lip chap. Sorry, Jen.
Busted.
Okay.
The smallest toothpaste you've ever seen in your whole life, and a toothbrush from our dental assisting program. Again, also with a little dental assisting logo right there. Health information management, you got to be able to take notes. So we've got a little notepad right there. Mental health matters stickers from our friends in addiction, human services and addiction studies. And we've got more of these stickers. So if you want a mental health matters sticker, just shoot me an email. Happy to send you one or more. Handmade or student-made granola from Cascade Culinary Institute. They call it the early bird granola on the sticker. It looks delicious. There's only one left, so you have to fight over it. And then in something that could have been the box on its own, our graphic design and illustration students made 8 greeting cards that are bound together by string and this little rubber ducky, which is the signature of our program director, Venus Nguyen. And you'll have to ask her why the rubber ducky is important to her. But each one features original student artwork. And something that blows my mind is that each one was also included with the student's name, their class, the medium, just little details about the artist. That just when we put out the call for this, never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that our CTE programs would give us such beautiful variety. They worked so hard. The students went above and beyond, and I'm so proud that these boxes are landing because I think it really shows the remarkable things that come out of career and technical education. It expands our concept of what it is. And it really is a testament to the remarkable faculty that we have at this institution. Thank you.
Amazing, Jen. Great
So
idea.
cool.
So well executed.
Giant thank you to Jen and all the faculty for just jumping right on board on that one. It's pretty fantastic to get that in the hands of our legislators and see our students work. It's pretty cool. So that on that note wraps up the president's report.
Okay. Well, I wish I was a county commissioner last week. So we are at the end of our meeting here. We do have important dates. Aaron Foote Morgan mentioned a fair number of them. Please look at those. Our next board meeting is March 13th. It will certainly be by Zoom as well as in person, unless we have another snowstorm or some other interruption that will hinder us not to be at the campus in person, rubbing shoulders. Is there anything else we need to cover or any last comments before we close out? Well, thank you, everyone, and we appreciate everybody else who was on our Zoom meeting with us tonight. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Good
Take
night.
care, everybody.
Drive safe.